Good morning. Good morning. All right. So I think everybody knows my name is Will Baker. I'm president of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm joined here somewhere by Dr. Bill Goldsborough and Dr. Beth McGee, two senior scientists there in the back. My notes say if you get any tough questions, hand them over to Bill or to Beth. That's what I will do. Beth focuses on water quality and Bill on fisheries. Now, some of you are a little bit new to this report, so let me just quickly review the methodology we use. On a biannual basis, we evaluate 13 different metrics related to the bay in three broad categories: pollution, habitat, and fisheries. We measure each on a range of between 1 and 100. 1 being dead, non-existent, nada, nothing, and 100 being that theoretical perfect that may have existed in pre-colonial times. I should note that in pre-colonial times, there were 44,000 residents of the Bay watershed, Native Americans. Today, there are over 17 million of us in the Bay watershed. So what's the bottom line? The Bay is improving, but it's still a system dangerously out of balance. The 2014 score is a 32 or a D+. Now, when I came home with a D+ on my report card, my mother wasn't very happy. So we're not happy about the score, but we're glad to see that it's going in the right direction. Our goal for the blueprint, for the Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint's 2025 deadline is a 40, which would represent a C+, a considerable achievement, and by 2030, a 50 or a B+. Long after I'm dead, we hope the Bay will see a 70 or an A+, but that will be sometime in the future, a fully saved Bay. Let's focus on pollution first. We all like good news, and this is where the good news lies. Overall, the water quality indicators are up 10% since 2012. Dissolved oxygen and water clarity improvements are the drivers. The Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint, established in 2010, is working, and this is critical, especially because the country's largest agriculture industry lobbying associations are still trying to kill it in federal court. So now is no time to rest. And one of the pollution indicators, phosphorus, is actually going down 2 points on this report. Much of this decline can be attributed to phosphorus-rich manure polluting local creeks throughout the entire region. The message is absolutely clear. Agriculture, as a sector, must do more. Agriculture is the largest sector of pollution coming into the Bay, and fortunately, it's the least expensive to control. Think about it. The largest sector, the least expensive to control, that's good news. We simply need agriculture to do more. We need to get serious about controlling phosphorus. It's no surprise that in the one part of this state, Maryland, where you see water quality declining, where other parts of the state it's improving, the Eastern Shore, the one part of this state is phosphorus laden. And it's the one part of the state where our elected officials have continued to resist sound science by delaying new regulations to control chicken manure and other forms of phosphorus applied to farmland. Science is repeatedly subverted by industry lobbyists. And in Pennsylvania, it's time for the Commonwealth and EPA to take the advice of the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. The Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, which has been calling on the state to declare the lower Susquehanna as impaired under the Clean Water Act. That's due to the frightening condition of smallmouth bass in the river. Until we are willing to make these tough decisions, we'll continue to see mixed results on the fisheries front. Downstream from Pennsylvania, here in Maryland and Virginia, crabs and rockfish are down. We will let science try to unravel that mystery. The data are still inconclusive, but the fact that they're down is not. Even with fisheries, though, there's good news, and that's where I like to focus. Oysters are up. 2 points over 2012, 3 points since 2010. That's a 60% increase in oyster abundance in the Chesapeake Bay since 2010. Watermen, packers, wholesalers, retailers, entrepreneurs who are farming oysters are all benefiting. The economy is benefiting. A decade of restoration is paying off. One thing we know, a rising tide lifts all boats. And to extend the metaphor a little bit, if you'll permit me, clean water is the rising tide on the Chesapeake. We will see increased fish and shellfish abundance if we continue to achieve cleaner water in the bay. In your press packets, you will see a list of specific actions we're calling on Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania to take immediately. These are critical because although the blueprint is working, there's a very challenging, very difficult milestone looming just 3 years from now. By the end of 2017, the states have committed to having programs in place to reach 60% of their pollution reduction goals, and they are not on track. The states are not on track to reach their 2017 interim goals. CBF, with more than 200,000 members, will do everything possible to see that we get the states back on track. Elected officials, new and returning, must see that saving the bay is not automatic. It will take leadership, making tough decisions, and putting the rights of the majority ahead of those who are seeking short-term profit gain by the minority. Two facts are critical. First, pollution hurts. It puts human health at risk, it destroys habitat, it limits recreational opportunities, all at huge economic cost. Second, clean water produces economic benefits across the board. This is well documented by Virginia economist and the lead author, Spencer Phillips, who produced with Dr. Beth McGee our seminal report on the economic benefits of cleaning the Chesapeake Bay. It documents, it demonstrates that cleaning up the bay would add $22 billion a year annually to the economy of the region. So our message to elected officials is this: the economy and the environment are simply two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. Reducing pollution in the bay and throughout all of its rivers and streams makes economic sense, it makes environmental sense, and it's good for human health. Thank you very much, and I'm glad to take any questions, with the difficult ones going to Beth and Bill. Thank you.
Jeff Day with Bloomberg BNA. Okay, Jeff Day with Bloomberg BNA. Governor-elect Hogan has said that the what's called the rain tax and the phosphorus management tool proposal are things he's going to try to kill. What comments do you have on that?
Well, if I get a chance to meet with Governor-elect Hogan, or perhaps when he is Governor Hogan, I'd like to hear his reasons. The phosphorus management tool has been delayed for 10 years. It is simply a requirement that no more phosphorus-laden manure be put on the soil than the crops can take up, based on good, sound, scientific soil testing. I am very interested to hear why he would oppose that, and that opposition, as you say, has been stated repeatedly. In terms of the effort to reduce pollution from urban areas, I'm heartened to hear that he does not agree that that is necessary. I believe, from what I've gained from the press, that he believes that a fee to be put in place by local jurisdictions to raise the money to address that pollution is something he disagrees with. He says that the state is mandating it, but the legislative history clearly reveals that it was the local jurisdictions who asked for state authority to impose funding opportunities so they would not have to dip into general funds. So I think the argument that this is a state mandate being foisted on the local jurisdictions doesn't quite reflect the history accurately. But we are heartened by the fact that he says this pollution must be reduced. Hi. We have some people online.
Yeah. So you've tried to meet with Governor-elect, and he hasn't chosen to meet with you, or what's the status of that? You kind of implied that.
When we meet, yeah, because we have not met yet. We have a practice here of meeting with the statewide candidates for elected office in all the states. And he was set to meet with our staff and our board of trustees before the election and was taken ill. And I sincerely believe that because he canceled all his appointments that day. He got a bad case of the flu, I think it was in October. Since the election, his folks have said he very much wants to meet with us, and we are perfectly open and available, so I take it it's a scheduling issue. So we look forward to when we will have a chance to meet with him.
And on the phosphorus, why did the O'Malley administration wait till after the election? You say it's been in the works 10 years, so we're going back till the middle of the Ehrlich administration, right?
One of the things I've learned is never to explain to others why somebody did something. You have to let them tell you why. We don't know why he waited. We would have liked to have seen it done years ago. It should have been done years ago. The pollution on the eastern shore and those rivers would have been less today if it had been done. I don't know why he waited.
Hello, Tyler Butler with WBOC out on the Eastern Shore. I guess sort of switching over to the fishery type thing. I don't know if this is necessarily your thing, but when I'm down there, a lot of the watermen say, oh, the reason that the oysters are coming back is because we're power dredging and we're scooping up the bottom and it's turning the oysters over and cleaning things up. Is there any sort of science behind that, or what is, I guess, sort of the leading theories on why the oysters are rebounding?
Bill Goldsborough, help. Come on. Bill Goldsborough, you want to do it from up here so you can.
Well, thank you for the question. There's no doubt that oysters are rebounding in a big way. Probably the single biggest factor is simply that they're surviving more on an annual basis vis-a-vis the diseases that had been plaguing them for decades. Then the next question is, why are they surviving the diseases better? The last big die-off we had was during the 3-year drought from 2000 to 2002, substantial die-off. We had a similar one back in the 80s and before that in the 60s when the diseases first appeared. Most likely, the disease problems that we have had during that history are in large part a result of increased stresses on the oysters from having their preferred three-dimensional habitat work down historically to a flatter substrate, which makes them more subject to siltation and smothering and exposure to low dissolved oxygen water in the deeper part of the bay. To the extent that we have seen improvements in dissolved oxygen, that stress is relieved to some extent. So that's a very positive factor at work there. But I think there also is a selective process at work. That big die-off we had from 2000 to 2002, well, what those die-offs have in effect on the population is that the strong survive and the weak die in a genetic sense. So what you're left with is a stronger gene pool, a stronger oyster population relative to the disease. So we've seen now for 3 years in a row over 90% survival in the annual surveys that the state does. So we think that that stress is largely relieved. In the lower bay in Virginia, they've actually scientifically documented increased disease resistance in bay oysters. So we think with that latest round of die-off that they're continuing to strengthen vis-a-vis the diseases. The power dredging that you referenced in the Tanger Sound part of Maryland's bay waters does tend to clean off the shell, and the watermen think that this improves spat set, the annual reproductive output of the oyster population. In some areas this may be true. It's kind of ironic, though, that because we work the beds down to a flatter subject, making them more subject to siltation, we feel we need to employ this dramatic gear to remove the silt and make them healthier. If they were a more three-dimensional substrate, they wouldn't require that. But there have been studies looking into this, and to be honest with you, the state has found no difference in spat set in areas that were dredged versus areas that weren't, even down there. So in some local places it may be a factor, but overall I don't think it's as big as the improved survival we've seen.
Sanctuaries?
Yeah, well, of course we've implemented since 2010 a dramatic comprehensive program for oyster restoration that includes setting aside 25% of productive bars as sanctuaries from harvest. And that will tend to reinforce the development of disease resistance in local oysters and provide local high-density spawning populations that will help cause spat sets to occur. So when you're improving or increasing the reproductive potential like that, you're going to see a boost as well. So thank you. That is absolutely another factor.
Any idea why the crabs seem to be having such a hard time with it?
Well, yeah, so the question was, do we have any idea why the blue crabs are having such problems? We certainly have some ideas. Science is not sorted out entirely, as Will mentioned. Starting in 2008, as you all may know, the states put in place a science-based fishery management program that kind of set guardrails for how the population should be managed in terms of the crabbing rate. And that's good. That's a very positive development, and within 2 years, the population had doubled, if you recall. But we've seen a drop-off since then to that 2008 number in spite of those guardrails. So we need to do more on a management standpoint, but I think this latest decline indicates that there are other factors that affect blue crabs, and the predominant one probably is degraded habitat, lack of grass beds where they find cover from predation. At the same time, we're seeing increases in predators, if you will. We had a big, strong year class of rockfish in 2011 that we hope will turn around that downward trajectory in the coming years. But they feed heavily on small blue crabs when they can get them. And they're lacking their preferred prey in young menhaden, so they're going to feed even more on blue crabs. So we think that's a factor. But it gets back to the habitat problem, which ultimately is water quality related. Grasses in the bay are down to about 20% of what they once were, and that's largely a result of nitrogen and phosphorus pollution.
I know you said you haven't met with Governor-elect Hogan. Could you just share a little bit about what you would want to tell him about trying to improve the bay?
Will, could you just summarize the question? We were trying to stream this event online so people watching this event from their computers can hear the questions. That's all we're trying to do with the microphone.
Yeah, so the question is, what would we say and ask of Governor-elect Hogan if and when we meet with him? And I think the very simplest answer is embrace and implement the Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint. This exists only here on the Chesapeake, anywhere in the world. It is a pollution reduction protocol that has been agreed upon by federal agencies, state agencies, local governments. It's absolutely science-based, it's comprehensive, and it's realistic. It can be done. So we would urge him to look at that, understand it, and go after it with every element of his administration focused on it that he can muster. What does it say? It says we need to reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment to levels that science has documented the bay can sustain. It's no more complex than that. Now, will that do everything? No, as I said, we feel that if that's implemented by 2025, the bay may be at a C+. So it is a beginning. It's not the end, but it's a very, very good beginning. And I guess the opposition to it, the federal court cases brought by the agricultural industry, shows that it's got real potential. I don't think they would be fighting it and spending as much money to try to kill it if they didn't think it had potential. They certainly didn't spend that kind of money and that kind of effort on prior agreements that were voluntary. And this is mandatory. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, a question for Beth. When you talk about the, when CBF talks about we'll see a reduction of 40% by 2025, is that an actual water quality improvement? Because the TMDL is really about putting policies and practices into effect that are projected to reduce pollutants. So what is your figure about?
Yeah, good. I'm glad you asked me to clarify that, and I can do this, Beth. The State of the Bay report that we're basing our number, and when we say 40, remember, that's not a 40% reduction, that's 40% of what the Bay had in pre-colonial times, 40% of a theoretical 100%. So this is our measurement, and it takes into consideration a lot of things beyond phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment. So when we say it's our hope that by 2025 we'll see our State of the Bay report be a 40, that is both independent of but also reliant on a successful implementation of the blueprint, because the blueprint does control the water quality issues on which a lot of this report is based, but not all of the report is based. Does that answer that? Yes. Yeah, thank you.
On the water quality. on the water quality piece.
Right.
Now, I haven't looked at the report, so I don't see exactly what you're forecasting. Is what you're forecasting there the actual water quality improvements or the implementation of policies and programs that are expected to produce those water quality improvements?
Again, yeah, very good question to clarify. It is the actual water quality improvements. So that's why you'll have a little bit of a lag, and why it's so important to remember that the blueprint completion date of 2025 is not an end, but really a point along a continuum of what we hope will be progress well into the future beyond 2025. Thank you. We're not taking any questions online, are we, John?
We're taking them, but we don't have any.
Right, oh, we don't have any, okay, good. Must have been clear as a bell. We'll be around. If you'd like to do a one-on-one, we're happy to do that, but thank you all very much. Appreciate your coming out. Happy New Year.